At first, it was just small things, almost unnoticeable. A towel out of place, a door slightly open when I was sure I had closed it, the bathroom light on, even though I always turned it off before bed. Little details I could chalk up to distraction, things I could ignore. Then I started losing things. Socks, silverware, my charger, random objects disappearing, then reappearing in places they shouldn't be. I was halfway through cooking one night when I realized my favorite knife was missing. Not just misplaced, gone. I lived alone, and that was the first time it truly bothered me. Then, one night, something happened that I couldn't ignore. It was late, maybe 1 a.m. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, half asleep, when I heard it, a soft dragging noise from the kitchen. My stomach tightened. I sat up, listening. Silence. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe the house was settling. But something about the sound, it hadn't felt random. It had been slow, deliberate. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. My breath caught in my throat. My skin tingled as a slow wave of cold terror crept through my body. I reached for the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a lamp. My hands were shaking. I stood up, every step careful, my breath shallow. The hallway stretched before me in darkness. Only the glow from the kitchen light illuminated the edges of the floor. I stepped forward, slowly, quietly. My pulse hammered in my ears. I turned the corner into the kitchen. Empty. But the air felt wrong, thick, heavy, charged with something unnatural. Like someone had been there just moments before. Then I saw it. The hallway closet door was cracked open. The door was open about 2 inches, just enough for darkness to seep through the gap. And the worst part? I knew for a fact I had shut it earlier. I felt something in my gut tighten. I wanted to run. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to get out. But I had to see. I had to know. I reached for the doorknob, fingers trembling. I barely brushed against it when, bang, the door slammed shut from the inside. I stumbled back, a strangled gasp escaping my throat. I turned and ran. Out of the apartment. Out into the street. I called the police with shaking hands. They arrived minutes later. The officers stepped inside, guns drawn. I watched from the doorway, my whole body numb. Sir, we found someone. My legs nearly gave out. One officer dragged him out of the closet. A man, thin, hollow cheeks covered in uneven stubble, wearing one of my shirts. His eyes were dark and wild, darting around like a trapped animal. He reeked, sweat, dirt, something rotting. They found a sleeping bag, empty food wrappers, and bottles filled with his urine. He had been living there for weeks. But the worst part? One officer pulled something from his pile of blankets. A photo of me, sleeping. They never figured out how he got in. There were no broken locks, no forced entry. And the scariest part? When the police tried to identify him, they found nothing. No records, no ID. And in the interrogation, he barely spoke, except for one thing, one sentence, over and over again in a soft, whispering voice. I just wanted to be close. That was years ago. I moved, installed cameras in every room. I never sleep with my closet open anymore. But some nights, when I wake up in the darkness and my heart is racing for no reason, I wonder, what if he was never alone? What if there were others? And what if, right now, someone is watching me again? It was my first night alone in the new house. The kind of old home with that creaks under your every step. The air inside smelled of dust and something else, something stale. Like the house had been holding its breath for too long. The air pressed against my skin, thick and unmoving, as if waiting for something. I spent the evening unpacking, trying to make the place feel less empty. But no matter how many lamps I turned on, the shadows seemed to stretch just a little too far, as if the walls themselves swallowed the light. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard it. A whisper. At first, I thought it was the wind sneaking through the old wooden panels. But as I lay there in bed, the sound grew clearer. It wasn't the wind. It was voices. Faint. Murmuring. I held my breath, straining to listen. The words were too soft to understand, but there was a rhythm to them, a cadence that felt almost ritualistic, like a chant murmured in secret. Like someone was having a hushed conversation just behind the walls. I told myself it was just the old house settling. That's what old houses do, right? They make noise. But then I heard my name, whispered, slowly. My stomach clenched. The sheets felt ice cold against my skin. No, I muttered under my breath. You're imagining it. But then, right next to my ear, close enough that I should have felt breath on my skin, I heard it again. Come downstairs. My body locked up. My mind screamed at me not to move. But something deeper, something primal, told me I had to look. I sat up. The room was dark, the corners swallowed in shadows. The house was silent now, as if waiting. I stepped out of bed, heart pounding, every floorboard beneath me groaning in protest. The whispers were gone, but the air felt heavier. I made my way to the staircase, staring down into the pitch-black living room. I should have turned on the lights, but some irrational part of me told me that if I stayed hidden in the dark, I was safer. I took a step down, then another. Halfway down the stairs, I stopped. My ears rang with the weight of silence. And then, the whispering started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the walls. It was coming from beneath the floorboards. A rising chorus of voices, all speaking at once, overlapping. Too many to count. Desperate. Pleading. Some of them sounded distorted, as if they were struggling to form words. Then one voice rose above the others. Louder. More forceful. We see you. The floor beneath my feet shuddered. I turned and ran back upstairs, slamming the door to my room, shoving my dresser in front of it. I didn't sleep. I sat there in the dark, heart hammering, whispering to myself that it wasn't real. But as the sun began to rise, something caught my eye. The floor just beyond my bed. The wooden planks looked warped, bowing slightly, as if something was pressing against them from underneath. Like something was trying to get out. I moved out that same day. I didn't go back. But weeks later, I got a message from the landlord. They had to rip up the floors. They found something beneath the house. Dozens of them, crammed together in the dirt. Some small, others broken. Rotting. I never responded to the message. I didn't want to know more. But sometimes, late at night, when I close my eyes, I swear I can still hear them, soft, insistent, whispering the same words over and over. Come downstairs. The whispering. I have one rule in my house. Never go into the basement at night. I don't know when I started fearing it. Maybe it was the strange smell that sometimes drifted through the vents, something damp and rotting, like old wood and mildew. Or maybe it was the way the air shifted when I stood near the basement door, like the space beyond it was breathing. Every time I passed by, a deep unease crawled up my spine, a whisper of something unseen pressing against me. Whatever it was, I learned to avoid it. But last night, something changed. I was in bed, half asleep, when a faint glow caught my eye. A sliver of light spilling from beneath the basement door. I sat up, my pulse quickening. The basement light was on. That was impossible. I hadn't been down there in weeks. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, swallowing the lump in my throat as I approached the door. Every step felt heavy, like the floorboards were trying to hold me back. The glow was steady, unnatural. With a shaking hand, I reached for the doorknob. It was cold. I turned it slowly, the hinges groaning in protest. The stairs stretched downward into the dim yellow light. The smell hit me immediately, stronger than before. Wet, decayed, suffocating. I took one step down, then another. The light flickered. Something moved at the bottom of the stairs. A flicker of motion, just at the edge of my vision, like a shadow pulling itself back into the darkness. My breath caught. The air felt thick, pressing against me, making it hard to move. I lifted my phone, aiming the flashlight forward. The basement was empty. The single, bare light bulb swung slightly, as if someone had just brushed past it. But there was no one there. I exhaled, a nervous laugh escaping my lips. Just my imagination. Just a draft. Then, as I turned to go back upstairs, I saw it. A set of wet, muddy footprints leading up the stairs. I hadn't come down barefoot. The footprints didn't belong to me. And worse, they stopped halfway up. My breath hitched, my legs locked in place. The realization sank in like ice. Whoever left them never made it out. Whoever left them never made it out. I locked the basement door that night, moved a heavy dresser in front of it, slept with the lights on, every muscle in my body rigid with fear. By morning, I convinced myself it was a mistake. A leak, maybe? A weird draft? But when I finally gathered the courage to check again, the footprints were gone. The smell was still there, and the light was on again. It started on a quiet winter night, the kind where the world outside feels empty, swallowed by the cold. I was curled up on my couch, half watching TV, half scrolling through my phone, when I noticed it, the shadow. A figure standing at the tree line of my backyard. My stomach twisted, a cold knot forming deep inside me. My breath hitched, and my fingers clenched involuntarily. The yard was blanketed in snow, untouched except for the single, dark silhouette. Perfectly still. Watching. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. A trick of the light. A tree branch casting an odd shape. But when I looked again, my breath caught in my throat. The shadow had moved. I told myself not to panic. I locked the doors. Closed the curtains. Out of sight, out of mind. Minutes passed. The TV droned on. My heartbeat slowed. I jumped. The sound came from the window behind me. Slow, deliberate. I turned, dread pooling in my stomach. The curtains were drawn, but I could see it, a tall, dark shape pressed against the glass. A breath hitched in my throat. It knew I was inside. I forced myself to stay still. Maybe if I didn't move, if I didn't breathe too loud, it would go away. The tapping stopped. Silence stretched. The window creaked, slow and deliberate, like the groan of old wood under unseen pressure. I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911 with trembling fingers. The operator answered. I whispered my address, my voice barely holding together. Then, in the quiet of the room, I heard something that made my skin go ice cold. Why did you call them? A voice. Inside the house. I ran. I didn't look back. I bolted for the front door, yanking at the lock, but my hands were slick with sweat. A loud crash behind me. I didn't stop. The moment I burst outside, the cold air hit my lungs like a slap. Blue and red lights flooded the street as a police car screeched to a stop. An officer ran toward me, gun drawn. They found nothing. No footprints in the snow. No broken windows. No sign that anyone had been inside. But as they checked the house, one officer paused. He was looking at my bedroom window. There, pressed into the frost-covered glass, was a handprint. Long fingers, smeared slightly, as if someone had dragged their hand away at the last moment. On the inside. There's something about attics that unnerves me. Maybe it's the way the air feels heavier up there, thick with dust and time. Maybe it's the fact that they're always just a little too quiet, as if waiting for something to break the silence. Or maybe it's because I know what I heard that night. It was late, past midnight. I was alone in my house, reading in bed, when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming from the attic. I froze, my pulse hammering in my ears. My house was old, it creaked and groaned with the wind, but this wasn't the house settling. These were steps. 1, 2, 3, stopping directly above my bedroom. The ceiling seemed to groan under the weight, and I swore I felt the faintest shift in the air, like something pressing down from above. I told myself it had to be an animal. A raccoon maybe? A bird? But something about the weight of each step told me otherwise. Then, as I lay there, paralyzed in my bed, I heard a noise that made my stomach drop. The attic door latch clicked. I wanted to believe I imagined it, that stress and exhaustion were playing tricks on me. But then, creak, the attic steps groaned under a shifting weight. Something was coming down. I shot upright, heart slamming against my ribs. A cold sweat prickled my skin, my breath shallow and ragged, as if the air itself had thickened with fear. My bedroom door was closed, but my mind raced with images of it slowly swinging open, revealing. I wasn't going to wait to find out. I grabbed my phone, dialed 911 with shaking hands, and bolted for the front door. I stood outside in the freezing night, waiting, listening, my breath forming frantic clouds in the air. And then, the attic steps creaked again. Not down this time. Like whoever or whatever had started to descend had changed its mind. When the police arrived, they searched the house from top to bottom. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No footprints. No animals. And yet, when they opened the attic door, the officer in front paused. "There's a light on up here." I felt my stomach churn. I hadn't been in the attic for months. The officers climbed up, their flashlights sweeping the space. And then they saw it. A single chair, placed in the center of the attic, facing the attic door. My stomach twisted into knots, my knees weakening as I imagined someone sitting there for hours, just waiting, as if someone had been sitting there, watching, waiting. I moved out the next morning, but sometimes in the silence of my new home, I swear I still hear them. The attic steps. If you've made it this far, you're braver than most. These were real accounts, chilling reminders that sometimes the unknown isn't lurking outside. It's already inside, watching, waiting. So tonight, before you turn off the lights, take one last look at your windows. Double check your doors. And if you hear a sound, a whisper, a creak, a faint tapping at the glass, don't ignore it. Because sometimes the things we fear the most are the ones that know we're afraid. If you enjoyed these stories, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And remember, some truths are scarier than fiction.